What if I told you that all of ancient Russia once divided the day into 17 hours, not 12, not 24, but 17? This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't primitive. It was a unified time system across a massive empire stretching from the Balkans to Siberia, a lost civilization we now call Tartaria, using technology that mainstream history claims wasn't invented until the 20th century. But then, in the year 1700, Peter the Great issued a single decree: tear down every 17-hour clock from the Kremlin towers, and replace them with European ones. They were dismantled. Destroyed. Erased from existence. Today, not a single original 17-hour clock survives. Why go to such lengths to hide a way of measuring time that was deeply connected to the stars and the cosmos itself? In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to show you the surviving evidence, and the real reason behind the biggest historical reset of the modern age. Stay until the end, because once you see this, you'll never look at a clock the same way again. Let's begin. Envision yourself having just ascended to the throne after a long period of turmoil and instability. Your decrees now carry the full force of law, deciding taxes, dispensing justice, and establishing ultimate truth. Then, unexpectedly, a report arrives before you: an alternative time system, a different chronological order, still persists across the vast expanse of your realm. Its markers are peculiar dials on various towers, divided not into the familiar 12 or 24 segments, but into 17. This is no mere decoration, it is a living testament to a bygone era, a reminder that before your rule, the land followed its own unique laws, its own measurements, and its own rhythm. As long as your subjects continue to live by these foreign clocks, their thoughts and loyalties remain partly beyond your sovereign grasp. With one decree, you could declare this ancient reckoning erroneous. New, standardized clocks would set the norm, and any dissenters would be branded rebels against the singular order you wish to impose. What path would you choose? To let your people keep their traditional time, or to reshape time itself, silencing the voice of the past? Now, let us explore how this intriguing scenario played out in real history. Pause before the impressive tower clock of Alexandrovskaya Sloboda. Do not dismiss it as just another museum artifact. Draw closer and contemplate the intricate dial that once precisely measured the hours for an entire empire. On its face are two concentric rotating discs, each inscribed with numbers in dual formats, ancient Slavic letters representing numerical values, alongside the Arabic numerals we know from childhood. These two systems run in parallel, duplicating each other, showing values from 1 to 17. Yes, linger on that number, 17. Not the 12 divisions on our wristwatches, nor the 24 that structure the modern day. It is this unique 17 that divides the circular face into segments of unequal lengths. Each segment, in its time, did not mark familiar minutes and seconds, but something fundamentally different and profoundly deeper. Direct your gaze not to a mere hand, but to the ingenious element that serves as the pointer in this unique mechanism. It is styled as a sun with rays gracefully spreading outward, fixed immovably at the top of the dial. It never moves, it stays anchored. Instead, the disk bearing the numbers rotates slowly beneath this stationary solar symbol. Moreover, it turns in what we now call the counterclockwise direction. Pause to consider the term counterclockwise. How did it arise if, in those ancient times, the primary indicator was stationary? Who decided that the modern clock hand direction is correct, and the opposite deserves a negative prefix? Perhaps the truth is the reverse. Recall other mirror image differences between Russian and Western traditions. We cross ourselves from right to left, touching the right shoulder first, in the West, left to right. We wear wedding rings on the right hand, they on the left. When ringing a bell, we often swing the clapper against a fixed bell. In the West, they swing the bell around a fixed clapper. This mirroring appears everywhere, as if two branches of one culture deliberately diverged. The design of these old clocks is another striking confirmation. Perhaps the counterclockwise rotation of the 17-division disc was the original, authentic norm, and what we see as natural today is a later alteration imposed with newer timepieces. Examine the mechanism itself, preserved in the museum. Note the 15th-century metal gears of astonishing precision and the wooden shaft from the same era, still capable of bearing its load centuries later. But what stands out as most enigmatic is the weight, officially called white stone. Gears are metal, shaft wood, yet the weight is stone. One might ask, why stone for mass when metal is denser? Yet this white stone is unusually smooth and uniform, almost as if cast in a mold. What if it is not natural stone but geopolymer concrete, a technology for molding blocks by mixing crushed rock with binders? Casting would be far easier than carving granite. Some suggest it appears hollow, like a vessel coated in white, allowing precise mass tuning with filler, an engineering feat beyond typical 15th-century understanding. These observations raise a profound question challenging conventional history: who possessed such advanced technology then? If mainstream science dates geopolymer concrete to the 20th century, then its use here implies the same method could explain massive, white stone blocks in ancient temples, suggesting many monuments were cast, not laboriously chiseled. At the dial's center is a celestial scene: starry sky, moon for months, scattered stars. Officially decorative, but why stars rather than heraldry or icons? Perhaps it was functional, a heavenly map for tracking not just daily time but position in grand cosmic cycles, making it an advanced astronomical instrument beyond mere prayer timing. These remarkable clocks adorned Alexandrovskaya Sloboda during the formidable reign of Ivan the Terrible, when it served as the nation's de facto capital. They continued under Alexei Mikhailovich, father of Peter the Great. But the revelation extends further. Identical 17-hour dials graced the Spasskaya Tower of the Moscow Kremlin, with similar mechanisms in Suzdal and elsewhere. Imagine standing in the vast red square of Moscow on a crisp autumn evening in the mid-17th century. The air carries the scent of wood smoke and distant pine forests. Above you towers the crimson brick wall of the Kremlin, and at its heart rises the Spasskaya Tower, its golden domes catching the last rays of the setting sun. As twilight deepens, a low, resonant hum rises from within the tower, followed by the deep toll of bells that seem to vibrate through the stones beneath your feet. All eyes turn upward. There, high on the tower face, two enormous clock dials glow faintly in the gathering dusk, one below the other, like the eyes of some ancient guardian watching over the city. The lower dial, immense and commanding, spans several meters across. Its face is divided not into the 12 parts you might expect, but into 17 unequal segments. A great golden sun with spreading rays sits fixed at the very top, unmoving, eternal. Beneath it, the numbered disk turns slowly, counterclockwise, carrying ancient Slavic letters and Arabic numerals side by side as they glide past the stationary sun. Each time a new division aligns with the sun's rays, a different bell rings out across the square, sometimes a bright, clear note, sometimes a deep, solemn boom. Merchants pause in their haggling, guards straighten their posture, and children stop their games. Everyone knows exactly where they stand in the rhythm of the day without needing to look up a second time. Higher still, above this daily dial, sits a second, slower circle. Here the heavens themselves are depicted, the 12 signs of the zodiac wheel around in majestic silence, Aries the ram, Taurus the bull, Gemini the twins, all the way to Pisces. Beneath each constellation, numbers 1 through 12 mark the months. This upper circle does not hurry. It creeps forward almost imperceptibly, tracking the sun's long journey through the sky over the course of an entire year. Together, the two dials form a single, breathtaking instrument, one measuring the fleeting hours of human life, the other the eternal dance of seasons and stars. This was no ordinary clock. It was a living map of the cosmos, a mechanical poem written in brass, iron, and stone, telling every soul in the city not just what time it is, but where we are in the great turning of the world. Yet today, if you stand in that same red square and gaze up at the Spasskaya Tower, you will search in vain for those two wondrous dials. The space they once occupied is empty, or rather, filled by something that feels strangely out of place. The famous Kremlin chimes now ring from that very spot, but the modern clock face is smaller, its mechanism visibly cramped. Old photographs and drawings reveal the truth. When the new clock was installed, workers had to saw away parts of the ancient stone columns inside the tower to make it fit. It looks, in every sense, like an afterthought, like a foreign piece forced into a space that was never meant for it. Where did the original masterpiece go? And more importantly, who created such an extraordinary system in the first place? The chronicles point to a single name, Lazarus Serban, a monk from far-off Serbia. In the year 1404, we are told, he arrived in Moscow and personally installed the very first great clock on what was then called the Frolov Tower, later renamed Spasskaya, Tower of the Savior, after a holy icon was placed above its gate. Picture him for a moment, a tall, bearded figure in a dark monastic robe, stepping down from a long, dusty journey across forests, rivers, and steppes. He carries with him tools, sketches, perhaps even parts of the mechanism wrapped carefully in cloth. The distance between Serbia and Moscow in those days was immense, thousands of kilometers of difficult roads, different languages, different scripts. Why would a Serbian monk travel so far just to build a clock? Could no local craftsman be found? And how did this traveler from the Balkans know exactly how to build a clock that perfectly matched the ancient Russian tradition, down to the 17 divisions and the old Slavic numerals carved beside the Arabic ones? The official story feels thin, like a tale missing its deeper chapters. But there is another way to see it, one that sends a shiver of recognition through anyone who looks closely at old maps. Open a map from the 16th or 17th century, any European atlas of the time, and you will find a vast territory stretching from the Balkans to the Urals, from the Black Sea to the Arctic, labeled with names like Great Tartary, Muscovy Tartary, or Independent Tartary. The borders shift from map to map, the names change, but the land remains one continuous whole. This was not a scattered collection of warring tribes. It was a single, immense cultural and technological realm. Within that realm, knowledge flowed freely. Master craftsmen traveled from one end to the other without needing interpreters, because the standards were the same everywhere. The same measuring systems, the same astronomical understanding, the same sophisticated mechanics. So when Lazarus Serban arrived in Moscow, he was not a foreigner bringing exotic Western novelty to backward natives. He was a highly skilled artisan from another province of the same vast civilization, summoned to the capital for a prestigious state commission. That is why his clock matched the local tradition perfectly, because there was no local and foreign. There was only the shared heritage of a great empire that has since been fragmented and forgotten. This also explains the beautiful duality on the clock faces, Arabic numerals alongside Old Church Slavonic letters, both used confidently to mark the hours. One script might have been more common in the eastern regions, the other in the west, but both belonged to the same people. They were not borrowing from strangers, they were speaking in two familiar dialects of the same language. And then there is that small but telling detail that only an insider would notice, the complete absence of the titlo, the little wavy mark that, in formal Slavonic writing, must be placed above a letter to show it is being used as a number rather than a sound. On coins, in manuscripts, on stone inscriptions, the rule was strict. Yet on these great clock dials, there is no titlo anywhere. Why? Because the master who designed them didn't need it. The circular layout, the sequential numbers, the context itself screamed, these are numerals. Adding a titlo would have been as pointless as writing the word number above every digit on a modern calculator. Only someone who lived and breathed the system, someone for whom it was as natural as breathing, would omit the mark with such calm confidence. This tiny absence speaks louder than any grand inscription. It tells us these clocks were not clumsy imitations or late experiments. They were the work of true masters, working at the height of a long, proud tradition. Part 3, The Enigma of the Number 17 and the Shadows of Contradiction. Close your eyes for a moment and step back into the bustling streets of 17th-century Moscow. The winter air bites at your cheeks as you hurry across the frozen cobblestones of Red Square. Snowflakes swirl around the towering walls of the Kremlin, and the scent of fresh bread from nearby market stalls mingles with the sharp tang of pine resin from torches lighting the evening. Suddenly, a deep, resonant bell tolls from high above, followed by another, higher note, then a third in a solemn sequence. You don't need to glance at your wrist, there are no such things yet. Instead, you tilt your head upward toward the Spasskaya Tower, where the great clock's golden sun catches the fading light. The disk beneath it has just moved forward one division. You count silently, that's the 7th hour of the day. Time enough to finish your errand before the gates close at dusk. But why 17 divisions? Why not the tidy 12 that Europeans favored, or the practical 24 that would come later? The number 17 haunts every tower from Moscow to Suzdal, a quiet rebellion against what we now call standard time. The official story handed down to us is almost comical in its clumsiness. The day was supposedly split into variable hours of daylight and night. In midsummer, there would be 17 long daylight hours and only 7 short nighttime ones. In midwinter, the reverse. A nice, neat explanation on paper, but try living by it. Imagine you're a merchant arranging to meet a caravan from the east. We'll unload at the 5th hour, you agree. But in June, that 5th hour stretches luxuriously long, while in December it shrinks to a fraction. Your partner arrives hours early or late, goods spoil in the snow, tempers flare, trade grinds to a halt. How could any society, let alone one spanning thousands of kilometers, function with a unit of time that changed length every week? Commerce would collapse. Armies couldn't coordinate. Courts couldn't schedule justice. The very idea is absurd. No stable civilization builds its life on such shifting sand. There must be a deeper truth, one that made 17 not just workable but profoundly meaningful. Perhaps 17 was never about equal mechanical slices at all. Perhaps it tied directly to the heavens, to lunar cycles, to the precise ratio of light and dark at northern latitudes, or to some lost astronomical harmony. Multiply 17 by certain lunar constants, and you might approach perfect alignment with the solar year or the zodiac's 12 signs above. The upper dial on the Spasskaya Tower wasn't decoration, it was the key. The slow-turning zodiac bridged daily life below with the eternal cycles above, creating a system that didn't just tell time, it placed every person within the living rhythm of the cosmos. We strain to understand it through our modern lens, 24 equal hours, perfect for factories humming in unison, trains racing across continents, stock markets ticking in perfect synchrony. Convenience over cosmic truth. But the old system demanded more. It required watchers of the stars, keepers of ancient calculations, a society that looked upward as often as forward. Yet if it was so superior, so widespread, why do no clear instructions survive? Why are we left grasping at shadows? The answer lies in the contradictions that litter the historical record, contradictions that feel less like honest mistakes and more like deliberate erasures. Take the famous illuminated chronicle, a beautifully illustrated manuscript meant to preserve the glory of the past. One of its miniatures proudly depicts the installation of the very first great clock by Lazarus Serban in 1404. You can almost hear the crowd cheering as the master raises his hand toward the tower. But look closely at the artist's rendering of the dial. It shows 12 neat divisions, complete with moving hands on a fixed face, just like any Western clock of later centuries. Now contrast that with a far more humble source, the travel sketches of Baron Augustin von Meyerberg, an Austrian diplomat who visited Moscow in 1661. He wasn't writing for posterity or currying favor with the Tsar. He was simply recording what he saw for his own records, and there it is, unmistakable, the Spasskaya Tower clock with its unmistakable 17-hour dial and 2 distinct tiers. The stationary sun, the rotating disk, the zodiac above, every detail captured with the precision of an eyewitness standing right there in Red Square. Who do you believe? The later chronicle, compiled long after the events, illustrated by someone who likely never saw the original? Or the foreign visitor who sketched it fresh from direct observation? Logic favors Meyerberg. But the chronicle's correction to a familiar 12-hour face feels suspiciously convenient, as if someone, centuries later, wanted the past to look more normal. And then there are the fires. So many convenient fires. The original Trinity Chronicle, the one said to mention Lazarus Serban by name, was discovered by a German scholar in the 1760s. Just 50 years later, it perished in the Great Moscow Fire of 1812. The only evidence left. Copies made by others, copies we are simply asked to trust. The great clocks themselves met similar fates, destroyed in blazes, dismantled during repairs, replaced piece by piece until nothing original remained. By the dawn of the 18th century, a new clock graced the Spasskaya Tower, imported from Holland, divided into 12 hours, marked with Roman numerals, its hands moving while the face stayed still. Everything inverted. And it was too small for the grand opening, requiring hasty modifications that scarred the ancient stonework. It looked, in every way, like a hurried replacement, like something seized in triumph and forced into a space that had been designed for something far older and far greater. But the deepest mystery remains, why 17? In the quiet of a forgotten archive, on yellowed maps from the 1600s, you can still find the answer hinted at in faded ink. Vast territories labeled Great Tartaria, stretching unbroken from the Balkans to the Pacific. One land. One people. One standard of time. As long as those 17 division clocks told from every tower, the memory of that unity lived on. And so, perhaps, they had to go. The year is 1699. A fierce wind howls across the frozen Moscow River as a tall, restless figure strides through the snowy streets of the old capital. Peter the Great, barely 30 yet already burning with visions of a new Russia, has just returned from his grand embassy in Western Europe. He has seen shipyards in Holland, academies in England, factories humming with precision. And he has seen their clocks, neat, 12-hour faces with hands chasing each other in what he now believes is the correct direction. But back home, something gnaws at him. Every tower he passes still bears the old mark, 17 divisions, a fixed sun, a slowly turning disk. Bells ring in sequences that feel foreign to the European ideas now lodged in his mind. The calendar itself begins the year in September, counting from the biblical creation of the world, over 7,000 years ago. To Peter, this is not tradition, it is backwardness. A chain holding his nation back from greatness. In a single stroke, on a cold December night in 1699, he issues the decree that will shatter centuries of rhythm. The year 7208 from the creation suddenly becomes 1700 from the birth of Christ. New Year's Day moves from warm September, when fields are harvested and nature awakens in old Slavic custom, to the dead of winter, January 1st, amid ice and darkness. Days no longer begin with sunrise but at midnight. And most crucially, every great 17-hour clock across the land must come down. Imagine the scene in Red Square the following year. Workers on scaffolding, torches flickering in the frost, carefully dismantle the massive dials from the Spasskaya Tower. The golden sun that had watched over generations is lowered on ropes. The zodiac circle that once linked Earth to stars is crated away. In their place rises a smaller, imported mechanism from Amsterdam, 12 hours, Roman numerals, moving hands on a fixed face. It doesn't quite fit, stone must be chipped away, columns sawn. But it is European. It is modern. Across the realm, the same fate befalls every tower. Chronicles and ancient records are summoned to the new capital, St. Petersburg, for safekeeping. Many never return. The Academy of Sciences is founded with foreign scholars whose task includes rewriting history, portraying the old Russia as barbaric, ignorant, in desperate need of Western enlightenment. This was not Peter's work alone. Across Europe, the same decade saw frantic calendar adjustments, the switch to the Gregorian system, skipping days, shifting new years. Why this sudden rush to synchronize time? Because something far larger was being dismantled, a unified temporal order that once stretched from the Balkans to Siberia, held together by the 17-division standard. Look again at those old maps gathering dust in forgotten libraries. Vast lands labeled Great Tartaria, unbroken from Serbia's mountains to the Pacific shores. One civilization. One trade network. One astronomical understanding. One time. As long as the old clocks rang out their 17 bells, people remembered. A merchant in distant Suzdal could arrive in Moscow and instantly know the hour by the tower's tone. A craftsman from the Balkans could maintain a mechanism in the Kremlin without explanation. The unity lived in every chime. So the clocks had to vanish, not looted for gold, but systematically destroyed as evidence. And the fires came, again and again. The great blaze of 1812 devoured Moscow, conveniently consuming priceless chronicles that might have told a different story. Original mechanisms melted or were lost in earlier conflagrations. By the 19th century, museums displayed only careful reconstructions, pretty models built from sketches, never the real thing. No authentic 17-hour clock survives today. Not one gear, not one white stone weight we can be certain is original. The last masters who understood the system's deepest secrets faded away. Their apprentices were never taken. Their knowledge died with them. Stand once more in the quiet museum hall of Alexandrovskaya Sloboda. The lights are dim, the air cool and still. Before you rises the reconstructed clock, brass gears gleaming softly, the great disk with its 17 divisions, the golden sun fixed eternally at the top, rays reaching outward like frozen light. At the center, a painted starry sky glimmers, moon phases, scattered constellations, as if the heavens themselves were captured inside the mechanism. It is beautiful. It is silent. No original survives. This is only an echo, pieced together from old drawings, scattered descriptions, and educated guesses. The white stone weight hanging below, smooth, unnaturally uniform, may or may not be the real 15th century piece. We cannot be sure. The gears turn, but they no longer measure anything real. They simply remind us of what we have lost. We have lost more than a peculiar way of counting hours. We have lost an entire philosophy of time. In our world, time is a commodity. We slice the day into 24 equal pieces because it is convenient for factories, for trains, for global markets. We set our watches by satellites beaming signals from space. We say, time is money, and we mean it. Every minute must be accounted for, optimized, sold. Our clocks tick forward relentlessly, detached from sunrise or moonrise, from the slow turning of seasons or the dance of stars. We are masters of time, or so we believe. But step back into that older world, just for a moment. Imagine waking not to an alarm but to the first bell from the tower, a deep, lingering note that tells you the sun has aligned with the first division. You rise, work, trade, pray, guided not by abstract numbers but by the living movement of the sky itself. Another bell rings at midday, its tone different, unmistakable even to the blind beggar at the church gate. Evening falls, the disk stops turning as the sun dips below the horizon, and the night belongs to the moon and stars, perhaps measured by a different system we no longer understand, linked through the great zodiac will high above. Time was not something you controlled. Time was something you lived inside, a vast, breathing cycle in which humanity was woven like a single thread. The 17 divisions were not random. They were not a mistake. They were the careful distillation of centuries of watching the heavens, of recording lunar phases, of finding the hidden harmonies between earth and sky. The stationary sun on the dial was not laziness on the part of the craftsman, it was profound symbolism. The sun does not move across the sky in our daily perception, we move beneath it. The turning disk mirrored the truth, it is the earth that spins, carrying us through day and night. And the zodiac above? It was the bridge. It reminded every person gazing up from the square that their fleeting day was only one small turn within a far grander wheel, the sun's year-long journey through the constellations, the eternal return of seasons, the promise of renewal. This was not primitive superstition. This was advanced understanding, expressed through mechanics we can barely reconstruct today. The masters who built these clocks were not isolated geniuses. They were heirs to a tradition that stretched across what old maps call Great Tartaria, a realm where a craftsman could travel from Serbia to Siberia and find the same standards waiting for him. The same gear ratios. The same dual numerals. The same white stone casting techniques that may have built temples as easily as clock weights. The same deep knowledge of astronomy that needed no telescopes, only patient eyes and generations of records. When Peter's reforms swept through, it was not just calendars and clocks that changed. An entire way of being in the world was severed. The last generation of true masters, those few specialists who could tune a 17-hour mechanism by ear alone, vanished from the records. No apprentices followed. No treatises were copied. The chain broke. Fires consumed what remained. Chronicles burned. Mechanisms melted. Memory faded. Yet faint echoes still reach us. In a 1661 sketch by a passing Austrian baron, we see the truth drawn by an impartial hand. In fragments of old folk songs, time feels different, fluid, tied to light and dark rather than rigid ticks. Even in a fleeting frame of a 1952 Soviet cartoon, an attentive eye catches a palace clock flicker from 12 to 17 divisions, as if the artist could not quite forget. The 17-hour dial asks us questions we may never fully answer. Who were the people capable of such precision in the 15th century? How far did their unified realm truly extend? What mathematics allowed them to align daily life so perfectly with cosmic cycles? And most chilling of all, why was it all destroyed so thoroughly, not scattered by war or neglect, but targeted, systematic, complete? There is only one answer that fits the scale of the erasure. Someone, some concerted force across centuries, wanted us to forget. To forget that we were once part of something vaster. To forget that time could be sacred rather than transactional. To forget that a single civilization once measured the day not for profit, but for harmony with the stars. The clock in the museum stands as a quiet accusation. Its reconstructed gears turn smoothly, but they count nothing real. The golden sun shines, but it no longer marks the true passage of light across the sky. We live by someone else's time now. We hurry through 24 equal hours, heads down, screens glowing, rarely looking up at the ancient wheels still turning above us. But on certain clear nights, if you stand in an old square and listen very carefully, you might almost hear it, a distant, impossible bell, ringing not 12, not 24, but 17 times. A reminder. A question. A call from a world we were never meant to forget.